Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to formally welcome everybody to the heavy lifting on annual planning, the one day to never be taken lightly. And I'd like to just cordially thank everyone for joining us today. That being said, we want you guys to understand that we understand that there's really nothing overly sexy or exciting about annual planning, but we all know that it's very much imperative that it's done efficiently, and it's done effectively. We look at it kind of as it's your yearly physical exam on your budgets, so it's just kind of make sure that everything is in good shape and you're nice and healthy and ready to go. So with that being said, let's go ahead and find out how we can lessen the load here in regards to your annual planning. To start off, let me introduce myself. My name is Jason Gottschall, and I am a senior copywriter and one of the creative leads here at Akhia. I have agency and corporate experience for the past, 12 years or so. I'd like to happily present my co-partner today, Kelly, who is a taskmaster and probably one of the most organized, if not the most organized person I think I've ever had the privilege to work with. So without any further ado, here's Kelly.
Thanks, Jason. As Jason mentioned, my name is Kelly Mcgrath. I'm an account director in our optimization department here at Akhia. I have agency, corporate, and nonprofit experience in the marketing and communications realm for about 17 years. And Jason and I are really excited to present the heavy lifting on annual planning. And we had a lot of fun putting this together, so we hope that it's helpful for you today.
So the first thing we're going to do to get started is just kind of get a quick level set here, and just with a quick survey, we wanted to know, how would you define your annual planning knowledge or experience? So let's just dive in quickly and let us know. Are you a novice? Do you know a little bit but not a whole lot? Do you stay awake? Were you proud enough to stay awake through last year's session but just really didn't grasp everything that you wish you could have gotten? Or are you someone that says, bring it on, nothing is better than budgets and PowerPoints? And we'll just give it a moment here to kind of gather all the results. Looking like we're getting quite a bit of people answering to C. I stayed awake through last year's session, so first off, congratulations on staying awake. Like I said at the very beginning of this, there's a lot to be done with annual planning, but it's not a lot of fireworks and big moments. It's just a lot of kind of nose to the grindstone and getting a lot of important work done. We very much appreciate this feedback, and we were kind of internally discussing, and we kind of thought like that would be around the answer that everyone would be saying. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a little bit more confidence and think, you know what, nothing can sway me, and nothing is better than budgets and PowerPoints, and I'm ready to kind of tackle this year.
Okay, so today we're going to touch upon annual planning in 3 ways. The first is really an intro to annual planning. We'll explain in our own words how we define annual planning and what it all involves, pre, during, and post-planning session. Then we'll move on to the 1, 2, 3s of annual planning. And this section really includes the 3 main takeaways that will resonate the most and help ensure a planning session that is efficient and effective. Finally, the ABCs of annual planning include 26 tips using every letter of the alphabet. But don't worry, we're not going to go through all 26 letters, but each one of these tips really are invaluable. So the big question, what is annual planning? To many, it could be seen as something scary or a long, drawn-out process, but it really doesn't have to be. This process should be fun and provide your organization the opportunity to create a plan that not only guides your annual activities, but more importantly allows you to align your annual budget. We like to think of annual planning as your roadmap for all activities and strategies that will take place at your organization throughout the year.
Okay. And kind of being able to allow us to understand, kind of giving our definition of what annual planning is, the next big question we kind of want to know is, how do you perform your annual planning? Is it as an individual? Is it something that you're just kind of given the task and then you have to kind of create and then email off to somebody else in another office? Is it a group or a team event, something where your group kind of comes together and you guys all collectively discuss what you need to do for the coming year? Is it within the department, or all the different department heads kind of all coming together? Or is it company-wide? Is there a representative from all the different functions throughout your company all meeting in one room to kind of collect all this stuff to begin with, and then at this big planning session, you guys all begin to discover and kind of discuss as a company-wide group what needs to be done? There's really no wrong or right way of doing it. It looks like a lot of people are preferring like the group and the team, which is very, very common. If you're somebody that has to do it, if you're tasked with being asked to do it as an individual this year, don't fret. A lot of what we're going to share with you today, there are going to be solutions that are going to help, regardless as if you do it by yourself. If it's company-wide, there'll be plenty of ground that we'll cover today to kind of help you. And we hope that there's at least one or two tidbits that you'll be able to kind of have in your back pocket when annual planning really starts revving up.
So let's move into the 1, 2, 3s of annual planning. As we mentioned before, annual planning can be fun if you understand and own your role in the process. So let's talk about our first step, which is really creating an agenda. The agenda is critical and will help guide your conversation and allow you to stay on track throughout your planning session. The agenda should really include everything that you want to cover during your meeting. It should also identify who from your organization is responsible for each item listed on the agenda. And it's also a best practice to circulate the agenda prior to the annual planning session. This way the people and your department involved understand what they're responsible for and can come to the meeting prepared. Our second step is really being prepared. So once you understand your role, you know what you're responsible for on the agenda, begin to gather information to support your initiatives. You've really spent your entire year measuring results, so make sure you know and can accurately quantify what's worked and not worked in the past. Some helpful things to consider in your meeting prep can include researching past and future costs before the meeting. This will help you really to begin shaping your budget. This is where you can say this worked or it didn't work. Know your industry trends and where your competitors stand. This will also help guide your conversation and allow you to make sure your plan supports and aligns your organization's strategic goals and key initiatives, as well as overall industry trends. And then remember, you want your team and your department to be seen as an asset during the annual planning process. So the more prepared you come into the meeting, the better off you'll be in helping to shape your organization's roadmap for the year. And then moving on to number 3, collaboration is really key when it comes to annual planning. Begin by ensuring everyone understands the larger organizational goals, vision, and strategic plan. And then really identify how each person or department can work together to meet those goals. As an example, how can maybe 2 or 3 departments support a specific product launch? Are there ways to share expenses or get more bang for your buck if you combine efforts and skill sets? This is where everyone should be working towards the same organizational goals. And if you're able to level set and collaborate early on, you're on your way to a successful meeting. So just as a quick reminder, the annual planning 1, 2, 3s include a solidified agenda, overall preparation, and collaboration. So now we're going to get into the fun part of the presentation where we really get into those 26 tips and tricks to help support your annual planning session.
All right, let's jump into these ABCs. And the first one's A, B, and C. We're going to really focus on kind of the pre-planning that is involved with your annual planning session. And one of the first things to do is to make sure that you're really kind of aligning your marketing goals with the company goals. Before you begin, just make sure that the goals of your marketing team, they ladder up to the goals that your company have set forth. And that you guys, again, just kind of reevaluate what those goals are, understand them, and then also make sure that everyone attending the planning session understands these goals as well. Sometimes a company goal might vary from what the marketing team is trying to accomplish, but just kind of making sure that there's something that connects the two, kind of building this connective tissue and then being able to kind of start planning around these similar goals, and building that alignment will just make everything a lot more crystal clear and kind of just make sure that you can kind of go forward with the planning that you want to do. some of the best sessions that I've been in, that I've heard about when it comes to kind of aligning marketing goals and aligning these company goals is making sure that the company's mission statement or even just value props are either on easels or they're handed out before the planning session begins, just because it's a nice constant reminder of what everything should revolve around and what everyone should kind of focus on throughout that day. Once you kind of have those goals solidified, you feel confidently that they're in alignment, go ahead and start balancing what your discussions should be and what your topics should be for that session. So this is just to ensure that you, at this time, will have an idea of how much time is allotted to get all this, to get everything answered and get everything figured out during this session. So this is where you would begin kind of laying out what needs to be covered. Think of the flow and the schedules that might be interfered with during this day, and then add time restraints and discuss ways to kind of create that flow from one session to the next. So this is just really kind of your very early beginnings of kind of building what you think your agenda could look like. Once you do have that confidence that you have everything kind of in alignment, go ahead and start creating that agenda. And this would, if you've balanced your discussions and kind of had everything laid out in the way that you're comfortable with, this would be kind of more, kind of getting a little bit more granular with it and really starting to break out that agenda. Add in your breaks, list names of those who will be leading sessions. If there's someone that has agreed to kind of be a prompter throughout the day, a timekeeper, if that's something that you would prefer to do, kind of have that part of this agenda kind of laid out. And the one thing that I kind of really appreciate is getting an agenda early, even if it's in the developmental stages. We found that the more often that you share that agenda, there's really no surprises on the day of that event. And it kind of allows people to say, oh, well, you had forgotten this thing, or we really want to concentrate on this. It kind of gives a moment kind of for a peer review and a peer evaluation to kind of give you back the information that you may have thought, oh, I can't believe I missed that. That kind of eliminates some of those issues. It also shows kind of the progress that you have already, and it begins already setting those expectations for that event. So I would recommend setting that as awareness early, and then I would send a final agenda as the event gets even closer. Maybe it's something that's attached to the Outlook invite for the overall session itself. But then don't think that the work is done there. Have copies waiting, just physical paper copies waiting on the day of the event. Someone's going to show up. If someone's coming from out of town, just making sure that you have those copies on hand will just really help kind of establish order early and kind of keep things on track throughout the day. So the more details that you can share in that agenda, the more granular you can get, the better it's going to be, and the stronger the day is going to go with regards to your scheduling. So this is kind of a softball toss of a survey question, but we wanted to know, just do you guys plan on creating an agenda, or do you create an agenda every year? And of course, you guys do. So well done. That's one big check mark you can put down as a great way of ensuring that you're on the right track for your annual planning. Just a reminder, just trying to wing it or just having a list of topics isn't enough. So be honest and don't be afraid to really pull details into your agenda. It could be as descriptive as possible, and should be followed during the session as much as you can.
So continuing with our ABCs, with the focus still being on that agenda as your main guide throughout the planning process, we want to be clear on who is tasked with doing what. So we want to define who is doing what so that each participant of the process feels empowered with annual planning. And when I say empower, I mean really empower them, give them assignments, have them collect information, help create a culture that doesn't feel like decisions are being made behind closed doors. This also empowers team members throughout the year to keep track of their information, so it's readily available when it comes time to start gathering all those documents you need for the planning session. This is especially important when it comes to financials. Really understand how your dollars are being spent and empower your team to share every invoice, estimate, or cost that they come across. I've learned that paper trails really do become your friend, which is why it's so important to also gather up relevant documents. Gathering those documents will help ensure that the numbers can be as close as possible to the final numbers you'll need. You'll be able to, again, see what worked during a project or a launch or a trade show and really see where you need to tweak those numbers moving forward. And estimates are always a good reminder of those projects that may not have went anywhere, but maybe are still a viable option for the upcoming year. And use that as a first step in resurrecting an idea that maybe you'd like to see come to fruition. When the information's in front of you, you're always more likely to share it. And talking about sharing, really a holistic approach should be used to ensure all departments are aligned with the materials they need and the information they plan to reveal and share during the session. When you take a holistic approach, you're really showing how each department is functioning together for the same common goals. And those goals would be the business goals that you've already kind of established at the beginning of the meeting. And then having an approach that threads itself from one function to the next allows for alignment among all departments. And I think this is something participants will appreciate. They want to make sure that they understand what they're talking about, but then we also want to make sure that they're really engaged in the process at hand. And to help do that, identify the necessary tools and resources to keep participants engaged. You know, think about the tone of the event. Usually planning sessions are very long, you know, maybe a half-day session. So you want to make sure everyone involved at the table is engaged and has a role in the discussion. And if you feel like there's too many people on their phones or on their laptops, build in tech breaks to your agenda and have, you know, make sure they put their gadgets away knowing that, you know, at a certain point during the meeting they'll be able to check emails and do whatever they need to do. Another way to ensure participation is to encourage various functions or employees to join forces. This is where that collaboration among departments really comes in to help with that holistic approach to goals. Another thing is, you know, make sure those goals can be shared with daily successes. For example, I always try to jot down wins or keep a separate email folder for successes or positive feedback. This also helps when you're asked to gather information. Oh, you know, this worked or it didn't work. It also makes it easier to access when it comes time for annual planning. And then leverage specific skill sets can sometimes help you build a case for internal budgets or a bump in educational options. You know, when you have proof on how that expanded role or education can help the company, you're more apt to get those dollars that you need to keep your projects moving forward.
All right, and then one of the main things that you really want to make sure you're doing, you know, pre, post, and during your annual session is to kind of just manage expectations, both with your team and those in the room. So if the day is going slower than you anticipated, if you're kind of on topic 3 and you should be kind of on like the 5th bullet of your day, let them know early that, hey, you know, we're behind, we need to kind of pick up and start really kind of thinking of ways that can kind of get you guys back on topic or back into the agenda. If there's a topic that seems to be kind of brought up consistently amongst various groups, adjust that agenda so that topic is dealt with sooner, or put it in the parking lot, which is something I'll discuss here in a second, so that it just doesn't continue to be mentioned and kind of slow down the day. So if you kind of see things kind of going off track a little bit, don't be afraid to speak up. Say, you know, that will be dealt with in a little bit. If it's something that the room collectively thinks that it's something that should be focused upon right then and there, and it kind of takes precedence just as the conversations grow in the room, go ahead and kind of make those adjustments, but just make sure that people kind of have managed expectations throughout the day so that it's not something that's a reoccurring thing. And if you feel that your group is full of talkers, I mean, there's plenty of us here at Akhia that can tell a 5-minute story in an hour, you know, and there's some can tell an hour-long story in 5 minutes. But if you feel that your room is full of talkers, maybe designate someone just to be that timekeeper so that the schedule is followed even more closely. You have someone to kind of say, okay, we have 15 minutes on this topic. That seems to have helped because it kind of helps people get laser focused a little bit. And so when we're kind of talking about sharing these ideas and making sure that there's everyone kind of is able to kind of manage those expectations and understand and feel confident that their topic will be discussed, remember to also kind of nurture those ideas throughout the day. Nurturing ideas can really complement can complement business goals, and just make sure that you acknowledge throughout the day that I hear what you're saying, I understand where you're coming from, and kind of just really making sure that people don't feel like, well, I was in the room the entire day and I don't think my voice was heard. That's something that you never want to hear. That's something that you never want to feel like you were a part of. So just kind of making sure that you're nurturing those ideas. One way that we suggest doing that is just to organize into those smaller subcommittees. And maybe establish what a certain goal is of steering those ideas and those initiatives. So that really gives people an opportunity to share maybe more than what they have while they're still kind of creating a peer-to-peer structure, so it allows them to constructively plan throughout the day. And it could help you if you're on a tight schedule or if your agenda needs to be followed more closely. This kind of allows you to kind of knock out a few topics kind of quickly and within groups that will collectively kind of help plan. So one of the big things for us, and something that we kind of always refer to while we're doing planning or even when we're doing kind of brainstorming sessions, is we have something that we call a parking lot. And I don't know how common those are, if there's something that you guys call it differently, but parking lots really help keep things organized throughout that day. A parking lot is really a dedicated spot. We usually have it on our whiteboard, or somebody that can, a person that is designated to take notes. They write down topics or pain points or issues that need to be discussed, but maybe only if time allows for it. Or if it's something that continues to be discussed and it's something that needs to be added to the agenda, but you still need to get everything out. You still have to go through your agenda first. It's something that's kind of like, we acknowledge what you're saying, we understand that this is the main concern, we have it kind of in the parking lot, we'll come back and we'll revisit this topic later. It's just something that kind of, again, goes back to kind of like nurturing those ideas, managing those expectations. It's putting that kind of visual, or kind of having that moment to kind of allow for people to understand that no idea is going to go ignored. Let's put it in the parking lot and we'll revisit it later. And then something that really kind of helps that we kind of always talk about, I usually use the word bite-size bits of information, but just making sure that when you are sharing, just making sure that everything is just very quick hitting. It's statistics, it's the wins, it's the best practices from the previous year that really will aid in your annual planning discussion. If it's heavy numbers, pull out those numbers that you know are the strongest, or the ones that are going to get, that are the most vital. Looking at pages and pages and pages of Excel, of Excel documents isn't really going to light the world on fire, but if you give one statistic that says we were able to do this with this budget and here's the results, and it's a 1, 2, 3 approach to it, people are going to listen because it's going to be in their language, and it's going to be in a bite-sized bit of information that they can kind of easily digest.
And if you do feel like you need more information, you're coming in with some bite-sized information, but you feel like you do need more for your meeting, have resources at your disposal. And what I mean by that is, have the necessary supporting documents, or have someone from your team on call during the meeting, to get that information to the person who requested it as quickly as possible. Usually, when the company or your organization is doing annual planning, the whole organization knows this is taking place. So have a team member kind of ready and waiting in case someone needs something during that meeting. And when we share information, always be sure to leave room for growth. This is where that scalability comes in. It's always more successful when sharing results and not ideas, and strategy and not opinions. I think scalability to accommodate growth will be admired in your meeting. They'll see how buttoned up you are and in your information, and also how successful you've been with the goals that you've been asked to achieve. And some of those goals really comes from some of the events that you've done. So timing is critical. So here's where we get into, come into that meeting and know the key dates for your company and industry. Maybe in a B2C environment, it's, knowing those specific holidays that consumers are working toward. Or if it's B2B, maybe it's those trade show dates that this specific show is happening every year. How do we plan for it? And timing is really even critical for annual planning. Make sure you get a date that works and can cover all the major events and budgets during that one session. And knowing all key dates, it's not only practical, but it really reinforces that you've thought of everything and know the busy and slow times for your industry and organization. And again, rely on your team to help you get all this information. This kind of really brings up another key point. Understand the importance of teamwork. And be sure that those in the room understand that this isn't just a one-person job. It really does take a village to do annual planning where everyone's ideas and thoughts really help shape, what your company and organization is doing for the year. And don't forget to include and don't forget to include variety as you put together and plan out your agenda. Oftentimes we're finding that the little ideas are just as important as the big ones, and oftentimes can work together to make sure that you're really connecting the dots within your organization.
Okay, let's finish up the alphabet here with something we had mentioned previously, but just making sure that your whiteboards, they'll be your best friend during these annual planning sessions. That's your visible scratch piece of paper for everybody to kind of see. It's going to be home to your parking lot maybe. Whiteboards, we use them all the time. They're in probably every conference room and probably every other office in our building, and it's just because we see so much value into it. Our brainstorming sessions, our annual planning sessions, they are written on, there's photos taken of them on the phones, they're erased, and then we start all over again. So just really, if you have room and you have a whiteboard, don't be afraid to grab a dry erase marker, get up there and start jotting down information. Another great tool, something that I've ran into in the past that has caused issues with people is that they'll get information. There'll be someone that will come into a meeting with the information and they're kind of reading off of it, and people are getting confused because they didn't really provide bite-sized information. It's kind of just spitting out a lot of facts and numbers and percentages. If that's something that they have physically, make a Xerox of it and distribute that in real time, just so everyone can be on the same playing field, everyone understands the topic that's being discussed, everyone is understanding what numbers he's speaking to or he or she is speaking to. And one of the other things is that you have all this build up to this big day. There's a lot of things that you're going to be doing in real time that day, but just understand that a yearly planning happens daily. It's something that I have a folder on my desktop on my computer that if it's something that is a quote or if it's an estimate, it's something that I kind of keep in this folder, so when the annual planning kind of comes up, I have everything that I can refer to kind of almost daily, so it's not a mad dash at the very last second to kind of gather all this information. And I know that that's easier said than done just because of everyone's everyday workload and everyone's nonstop working environments, but trying to make that a habit, you'll kind of quickly find out, like, oh, wow, even if it's something that you have on your Outlook, if you have just a folder in Outlook for estimates or, statements of work or whatever it is, that you could just have one easy repository to kind of drop those all into, you'll find that when it starts coming to, like, well, where do we pull information from, you'll have kind of this quick reservoir that you can kind of go to kind of have that information. And finally, this is just something that a reminder of kind of your attitude throughout the day during your annual planning is just have some zest in your attitude. Have some pep in your step, especially if you're going to be someone that's going to be leading this or you're going to have a large chunk of that day dedicated to what you have to say. The audience, the people in that room, they're going to feed off of everyone else's personalities, everyone else's attitudes. So the happier you can be, the more supportive you are throughout the day, that's going to feed into the rest of the people in attendance. Something that I'm always happy to see, something that I know that everyone's usually will be excited about, is if you have a chance to bring coffee, bring some pastries or something in from a local bakery to kind of just really surprise and delight everyone throughout the morning, and something they can kind of go back to and nibble on throughout the day. But that just kind of keeps the spirits high, kind of keeps the personalities and the attitudes positive, especially when you're the moderator, because, like I said, everyone in the room will be feeding off of you and feeding off of your personality. So we wanted to kind of, lessen the load and give you guys kind of all the heavy lifting as quickly and as succinctly as possible, but we wanted to also make sure that we left plenty of time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'm sure we have some that are already queued up. Now is the time to go ahead and share that. We have one of our first questions, and the question was, where's the best place to do annual planning? Is it something that should be outside of the office, or is it something that should be done inside the office? I personally always prefer it inside of the office. I always feel like it's a bit of a field trip if you're going anywhere outside of your office, and that just leaves more room for distraction. I think if you're doing annual planning and you're doing annual planning correctly, you have scheduled what room you want to be in, you have a good idea of the number of people that are going to be attending, so you know that you have the right room size, you know, again, going back to the whiteboards, the easels, the Xerox machine, you're in an environment that you're comfortable with and you have all the tools kind of at your disposal. So I would recommend, I would stay within the office walls if that's possible.
Okay, we have another question. So the question is, if there are projects or new initiatives never done before by my company, how do I plan for them? I think this really comes into play with, making sure you have kind of all of your ducks in a row. What are those resources? What are those budgets? What are those supporting documents that you need to really sell this new initiative or project into your company? The more background information you could share during the meeting, be able to answer any questions that the team may have, I think the better off you'll be in seeing that project or new initiative come to fruition. So it's all about that being prepared when you come to the meeting. So our next question is, what if you are annual planning for nonprofit you are part of and every key person is in a different city? Do you recommend a Skype call, WebEx, etc.? This could be tricky, but it doesn't have to be something that deters you away from doing that annual planning meeting. Oftentimes people do fly in if you're able to. Sometimes with a nonprofit you're not able to have everyone come in. But again, it really depends on that agenda. Make sure those people that are in a different city have that agenda so they know what they can expect. And probably a WebEx where they're able to kind of see the agenda, and kind of if someone shares a document, you can share it on that WebEx. So there's ways to get around, having people in different cities, but it's really about collaborating and making sure everyone's prepared and sees the same information.
And if you kind of have like kind of the sticks in the wind type annual planning sessions, one of the things to do then, just a part of, again, it's almost an addition, like we were saying earlier, kind of as detailed as you can with your agendas. If you're using a WebEx or you're using some kind of technology and you have the function to kind of share a screen, have those instructions maybe with screen grabs that you also send in. So in the event that someone can screen share, they easily have access to do that. It's just, again, another quick way of kind of making sure that you're buttoned up and that people aren't going to be panicking the day of the planning session. Okay, and I think that will cover all of it. I want to thank everybody for attending today's session, and if you have any additional questions or if there's anything more that you kind of just want to ask us about Akhia, about our capabilities, about really, how we function and how we do what we do every day as well as we do, go ahead and email us at thinkaboutit@akhia.com, and we'll be sure to answer anything and everything you guys have to ask. So again, thank you very much for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. Goodbye.